Hi there. Now we're going to look at ways that we can use visuals, particularly pictures, to remember things that you might not have thought that you could use before. So we're going to be looking at the Ten Commandments, and originally the Ten Commandments were given to the people of Israel who had been living in captivity for 400 years and no longer had a true concept of who God was or what He was like. So I'm going to give you some visuals, and in the next 15 minutes you should be able to decipher all of the 10 commandments one by one just by remembering a picture in your head. Let's start with the first commandment.
The first commandment is foundational for what the people of Israel needed to understand about God, and that is it was based on relationship, and He did not want any other idol or any other thing that they had originally maybe worshipped or thought was equally legitimate to be seen as God. He wanted them to know that there was Him and there was nobody else. And so the first commandment is very simple. It's going to be a ribbon. And this one can help you remember that the first commandment is to put God first. Or actually it was, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You will have no other gods besides me. I'm going to see how long it takes for you to guess what the second commandment is. But it is related to the first. It has to do with who God was and what He expected from people who followed Him and were to be seen by the rest of the world as His people. And the people of Israel were used to having multiple things that they could worship and bow down to. And so this second commandment is very clear, and it is, don't make or worship idols. In other words, as the Old Testament describes, they used to do all kinds of things, worship all kinds of things, and they would quantify the deities that they believed in by making pictures of them or by sculptures or carvings or different things in order to kind of quantify what they imagined their deity to be. And God said, I'm bigger than any kind of image that you could imagine or create. Don't even try it. And for that matter, don't worship anything else that has a physical image. I am God, and I am who I am, and there is nothing that can quantify me other than me. I reserve the right to do that myself. So the second one is, don't make or worship idols. And it's interesting, we in this culture today, we think of idols as TV stars, movie stars, anybody that's famous. And that's kind of interesting because an idol can be anything that has your heart besides God. And so even though we don't worship carved statues or paintings anymore, the command is the same for us, that nothing should be more important to us than God. We put God first, and we don't make or worship idols. And that is commandment number 2. And now for commandment number 3. This one is going to be maybe a little bit trickier for you to guess. But maybe as we get a little bit going, you'll be able to put some imagination into it. We see a man here who on one side, he is using a name for something good. And here, he's using that same name to say something not good. This is what in the old English they say, do not take God's name in vain. We're going to make it a little clearer for our modern audience and say, don't misuse God's name. Just like I would not be allowed to write a check, your check, for something that you did not authorize me to use it, God reserves the right to say who He is and what He stands for. And so in those days, they would never have thought of using God's name as a cuss word, although that definitely is a misuse of His name. But what they would do is say that God told them to do something, or that God wanted something from someone else that He hadn't communicated, and so that was causing God to get a bad name to some people who didn't know what He was like. And so He said, "Don't make my name useless." The word vain means useless. Don't make my name something that's of no value. I reserve the right to say what my name is for. So don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And in modern language, we would say, don't misuse God's name. And that is commandment number 3. All right, this picture is quite a bit anachronistic considering the original context, but I'm asking you to forgive me for that because it will help you to remember the commandment. We have a church building here, which is anachronistic in and of itself, considering these were Israelites, but no matter. All right, the 4th commandment is, can you guess what in Old English they said, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Actually, the word Sabbath means rest. And these people had been slaves for 400 years, and they had to work 7 days a week. God was telling them that He wanted them to take a day to rest and pray. Just take a day to stop working. Take a day to remember who God is, who you love, what's important, and just rest. Stop working all the time. And that is a commandment that we often forget about today because we think that it's more spiritual or more successful if we never stop. But God didn't create us to never stop. He created us to hold still every so often and Shabbat, or to have Sabbath, and to rest, and to allow Him to make us strong again and give us a realization of who He is and who we are to each other. So number 4, commandment number 4, take a day to rest and pray, or in Old English, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, keep it special. That's commandment 4. Okay, the 5th commandment in the days that God gave the 10 commandments to the people was not used in the same way that we use it today. In those days, the elderly parents had nowhere to go except for the care of the children. And so the children were expected to take care of the parents in their old age. They were to wash their faces, lead them wherever they needed to go. They were to make sure that they were fed. Everything when the parents were no longer able to care for themselves, that fell onto the children. And when this commandment, commandment number 5, honor your parents, was delivered, God said that it was the one commandment that had a promise that you would live long in the land. And there's a reason for that. As children grew up and, of course, obeyed their parents while they were young, they didn't consider themselves that they'd grow out of honoring their parents. What they didn't do, they may not do everything that their parents told them to do when they were adults. But what they did do is honor them. And as their children were watching the parents take care of their parents, then they were understanding that when they grew up, that was to be expected of them. So basically, God was telling people, look, you take care of your parents, and your children will then take care of you. You'll live long in the land if you honor your parents. And that's commandment number 5. Okay, this is a disclaimer. You will be able to tell that I do not spend very much time around the object that I am drawing right now because it is going to look very poor. And no, the 6th commandment is not, do not blow dry your hair. It is, do not kill. So this is my feeble attempt at a gun. This is not art class. This is how to remember stuff. This is do not kill. And remember that the people of Israel were coming from a place of slavery where people could kill them at will. The people that were oppressing them could kill them for disobeying an order or any number of other things. And so their value of life was not what God wanted it to be. And so God was bringing them back into the value for life that he wanted them to have, since people are made in the image of God. And so looking at this sad version of a gun, you can just remember that the 6th commandment is do not commit murder. Don't kill, because God values people. We should too. The 7th commandment is also a pretty simple one to explain, but not always the simplest one to do, depending on who you choose in the first place. Can you guess what it is? The 7th commandment is always be true. Don't commit adultery. And remember what Jesus said, that even looking at someone with intent, lustful intent in your heart is being unfaithful in your heart. And God wants people who commit to one another to stay committed to one another and not be wondering if they can do better or if they've still got it later. So the 7th one is pretty easy to describe, and it is always be true, or do not commit adultery. That's commandment number 7. You're going to have to turn your head sideways to see this one. I'm giving you a hint for the 8th commandment. You know what it is? Don't tell anybody else yet. Are you guessing what it is? This is a burglar climbing in your window. He does not want to be discovered. And it is do not steal. In those days, remember, again, they were going back to their original context where they had just come out of. They had been slaves. They needed something. They didn't have any sense of honor for ownership as God wanted them to have, because they didn't even belong to themselves. So the whole concept of getting to have possessions that stayed with you and not just taking what you needed in order to survive was a relatively new concept, at least in terms of connecting that with something that a deity wanted, that God wanted. And so the 8th commandment is do not steal. Pretty simple. That's commandment number 8. All right, as I go into the 9th commandment, I want to describe for you, in case some of you might not be familiar, one of the primary ways that people that broke the law were dealt with in those days was to be stoned to death. There were no prisons for the Israelites, they were transient at the time. And so it was really important that people tell the truth about other people, because if you wanted somebody whacked, basically, if you got really mad at somebody, it would be a temptation to lie, accuse them of saying or doing something that could have gotten them killed. And so the do not commit, do not lie about your neighbor. This guy, he's trying to get off. He doesn't want to tell the truth about that he did something, so he's blaming it on somebody else. But in those days, it actually had a double significance, because if you lied about somebody, or you got somebody else to be a witness for you, because if you had 2 to 3 witnesses that somebody did something that was against the law at certain levels, you could actually get that person killed. And so God was saying it was not okay to lie about somebody else. And that goes into the fundamental issue of lying at all. God is true. He's completely true. And so he expects his people not to lie. Not just not to lie about neighbors, but not to lie in general, to tell the truth. If you're a follower of God, you tell the truth. So the 9th commandment is do not lie. If you think that you have done a pretty good job at saying, I don't generally break the commandments, I think I do a pretty good job, then I think that you might be challenged by the last one. We've got to get you somewhere. If we're being honest, we've all broken a good number of them, at least in our hearts, from at one time or another. But this is the very last commandment. And remember, people were coming from a place of not owning things, and now they were being blessed with all kinds of things that they never had before. But I want you to take a close look at this picture. The way that it translates today, I hope it's starting to get a little bit clear. Basically, we all have things that we don't like about ourselves, or maybe that we wish were a little bit different. And these 2 girls may be jealous of different things of one another, but God says, don't covet, or in more modern English, don't be jealous of what other people have. Be grateful. Don't covet what other people have. Don't covet what other people get to do. Be grateful for the things that God is putting into your life. And part of loving other people is to be glad when good things are happening to them. So God wants people to focus on the good things that he's doing in them and the good things that God is doing in others, and to be grateful for those things and to support others instead of being jealous. And that's commandment number 10.
Okay, now let's have a little bit of fun. I am going to, without you having any opportunity to practice, I'm just going to shout out a number. You think about the picture, and we'll see if you can get the commandments. Are you ready? Commandment 1, put God first. Commandment 10, don't be jealous. Commandment 6, don't commit murder. Commandment 8, don't steal. Commandment 4, take a day to rest and pray. Remember the Sabbath. Commandment 3, don't misuse God's name. Commandment 2, don't make or worship idols. Commandment 5, honor your mother and father. Commandment 7, always be faithful, always be true. See, you have the commandments already just by looking at the pictures. And what I want you to try and do now in your future, when you're trying to memorize things, don't just think about the words. Think about the content and think of an image. Try it, even if you're not an artist like me. I'm not an artist, but you can make up pictures, little things, images that will remind you of the concepts that you're trying to remember. It's so much better than just words alone. I hope that helps you, and try and use that in something this week.